Hi there, I'm the nature guy, and today I'm coming to you from the Beal Plantation. The Beal Plantation is just right next door to Camp Au and this was the site of an experiment that was started by Dr. Beal. He was a botanist from what is now Michigan State University, and in 1888 he started this grayling project. And what his job was to figure out what kind of trees grow best in this area, because you see, back in the middle 1800s, this was all cut down. Settlers, of course, they would come up, would need logs to build barns and homes. But more than that, the cities of Detroit and Chicago needed lots of lumber to build all the homes there back in the day. And so all of this area had been growing up in nice red and white pines and some oak, and that was all cut down, and it was barren. There was hardly anything growing here. For miles and miles you wouldn't see a tree. And so Dr. Beal's job was to try to figure out what would be the best things to replant in these deforested areas. And so he had several plots in this area. Apparently there was 80 acres that runs parallel to the border of Camp Au and he had 3 different plots. One plot he just left, didn't do anything. The other plot, that was kind of his control. The other plot was he plowed it and worked the ground, but then didn't plant anything, just let that go. And then the other thing that he did was, of course, plowed up some areas and planted trees. He planted thousands of 41 different kinds of trees. Some of them were trees that were common in the area, like white pine and red pine. Some of them were trees that weren't naturally growing here, and he planted all sorts of different ones to see. There were cedars and hickory and black locust, Scotch pine. He even planted Norway spruce from another continent to see what would grow. And now this is almost 150 years later, we can see the results of his planting. Some huge trees have grown up. Well, what's interesting is most of the different trees that he planted that weren't naturally from this part of Michigan did not do well. The soil is very sandy here. It gets dry in the summer sometimes. And many of those trees didn't grow at all, or they're just really small trees. If you walk through the forest, you can find some remnants of them that just didn't do real well. But what the trees that did do really well, not surprisingly, were the red pines and the white pines and the oaks that were naturally growing here. And he planted some of those. But remember, some of those plots that he just left, they all grew up in pine and oak. And the parts where he plowed, they grew up almost even better, because I think what happened is the acorns and pine cones that were already on the ground when the trees were cut, when he plowed them over, he kind of buried them and helped them grow into a forest. So just not doing much, but letting the forest regenerate by itself turned out to be the best. Now, there is one tree that he planted that doesn't belong here in Michigan that did really well. They've grown into huge trees, and we're going to go over there. I'm just going to take you over to one of these trees here. This is a Norway spruce, and it did really, really well. And there's a whole row of them here, actually, if you get out, and they have produced cones, and there's baby Norway spruce around. In fact, I have found a small Norway spruce that must have come from this plantation, because they're not anywhere else, growing on Camp Au next door. So they're starting to spread. And it turns out Norway spruce grow in Europe at about the same latitude that we do. So this area has sort of the same climate that Norway spruce would have in Europe. So it's not surprising that they're doing really well. So I love walking through this forest. It's a nice little path here through the Beal Plantation. There's actually only about 7 acres left of the original 80-acre study site, but it's very cool to walk through this guy's experiment. Well, what's the lesson that we can learn from the Beal Plantation and these trees that have grown here? Well, the Bible is full of all sorts of instructions of what's good for us and things that aren't good for us. You know, God made man and he knows what's best for us, things that we should do to make ourselves happy and prosper and to help others. And then there's some things that aren't so great that are just going to lead to sadness and hurting others. So just like this area here, what's supposed to be here grows best and the other stuff doesn't do well. That's what God wants for in our hearts. He wants us to be doing the things that are good for us and good for our neighbors and friends so that we can be a much happier group of people. Well, that's it for today from the Beal Plantation. We'll see you next week. Bye now.